For a long time, I believed I was immune to the kind of story people whisper about after a breakup. The "I never saw it coming" type. I'd scroll past posts online, shake my head, and think, how do you miss the signs? Turns out, you don't miss them, you explain them away. My wife and I'll call her Hannah, had been together for 6 years and married for 4. The early years were easy. Not because we never disagreed, but because we knew how to bounce back. We had those little rituals couples build without realizing it: late-night snacks after a stressful day, teasing arguments about movies, weekend walks where we planned trips we might never take. She was the organizer, I was the steady one. Together, it worked. If you'd asked me a year ago whether she'd ever leave, I would have laughed. Hannah wasn't impulsive. She didn't blow up over small things. She didn't threaten divorce during fights. She wasn't the type to create drama for entertainment. That's why the changes felt so confusing, because they didn't arrive as an earthquake. They arrived as a draft. It started with her phone. At first I barely noticed. Hannah had always been casual about it. It used to live on the coffee table, screen up, buzzing whenever someone texted. Then one week it moved with her everywhere: kitchen, bathroom, the laundry room, even short trips down the hall. She'd set it face down, always within reach. If I asked what she was watching or who messaged, she'd answer normally, but something about her posture was different. Tighter. Guarded. I tried to laugh it off. One night I joked, "What's next, you're joining a spy agency?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Work's been intense," she said. "Lots of emails." A few days later, her phone had a password. That caught me, because she'd never cared before. I asked casually, expecting a casual answer. She shrugged. "You never know these days. Hackers, scams, privacy." Reasonable explanation. Still, it felt like a costume she'd put on quickly, like she'd practiced saying it. Then came the calls. She started stepping out of the room to take them, sometimes even outside. She'd say, "Let me grab this," and disappear into the bedroom, shutting the door. When she came back, she'd be cheerful again, almost too cheerful, like she was trying to polish over a crack in the wall. And the distance between us grew in ways that were harder to describe. Our conversations used to flow without effort. Now, everything felt like I was lifting boxes, heavy, awkward, exhausting. If I mentioned future plans, renovations, vacations, even saving for a newer car, she'd nod and say, "Sure, we'll see," and then change the subject. It wasn't one huge betrayal that made me uneasy. It was the collection of tiny changes that didn't fit the woman I knew. I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I didn't even know what I would accuse her of. But I felt it, something was forming behind the scenes. And I was the last person invited to know what it was. 2 weeks later, I got a moment that I still replay in my head like a scene from a movie I didn't choose to watch. Hannah told me she was meeting a friend for coffee in a neighborhood across town, Riverside Park, a trendy area filled with boutiques and overpriced pastries. She said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. I was running errands nearby and thought I'd surprise her. Nothing dramatic. Just show up with a smile, make her laugh, remind her we were still us. I drove to the cafe and saw her before she saw me. She wasn't sitting inside with a friend. She was outside, pacing near the entrance. Phone pressed to her ear, voice low but urgent. Even from a distance, I could tell this wasn't a relaxed conversation. Her shoulders were tense. Her free hand kept twisting the strap of her bag as if she needed something to anchor her. I stayed in my car. Not because I planned to spy, but because the scene didn't match what she'd told me. I watched her take a few steps, stop, speak quickly, then glance down the street like she was waiting for someone. I couldn't hear everything through the glass, but I caught fragments, words that made my stomach tighten, almost ready, and starting over soon. Starting over. It's one of those phrases that can mean 100 things, yet in that moment it landed like a hammer. Starting over doesn't sound like a workplace problem. It doesn't sound like gossip about a friend's boyfriend. It sounds like a plan. When she finally ended the call, she slipped her phone into her pocket and walked inside. She looked normal again. Composed. In control. Like she'd turned off one version of herself and switched to another. I didn't go in. I drove home with my thoughts racing, trying to build a harmless explanation out of scattered pieces. Maybe she was helping someone with a move. Maybe she was preparing for a new job. Maybe starting over was about a diet, a hobby, anything. I wanted that phrase to mean anything except what it felt like it meant. That evening she acted relaxed. She ate dinner, asked about my day, laughed at a dumb video I showed her. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, until she brought up finances. It happened casually, like she was talking about groceries. We should probably organize everything, she said. Like all the account info, documents, passwords, just in case. I looked up from my plate. Just in case of what? She shrugged. Emergencies. If something happens. It's smart. On paper, she was right. Couples should know where important documents are. But we'd never cared much about that before. We kept things simple, a joint account for shared bills and separate accounts for everything else. We didn't hide money from each other, but we also didn't micromanage it. It worked. Her suggestion wasn't wrong. The timing was. Over the next few days, she brought it up again. Not aggressively, but persistently. Do you know where the account details are? Do we have everything saved? Should we make a folder? Each question felt like a gentle tap on a locked door. Finally, I asked directly, trying to keep my tone light, okay, what's going on? You've asked about this a lot. She paused, then smiled too quickly. Nothing's going on. I just want us to be prepared. But when someone is telling the truth, their answers feel natural. Hers felt rehearsed. And that was the moment I stopped wondering if I was paranoid. Because paranoia is fear without evidence. What I had was a growing pile of evidence, and an instinct that something was coming. I didn't confront Hannah again right away. Part of me hoped the strange behavior would fade, and I'd feel stupid for ever worrying. Another part of me, quieter but more convincing, kept repeating one sentence: if you wait until you're sure, it'll be too late. So while she was at work, I logged into our joint bank account. At first, everything looked normal. Bills paid on time. Grocery spending about the same. Then I noticed a few small transfers over the past month, amounts that weren't huge, but also weren't random pocket change. A couple hundred here, a few hundred there. No clear explanation, no matching receipts in our usual patterns. Not rent. Not utilities. Not anything that made sense. It wasn't proof of betrayal. But it was proof of a secret. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to remember every conversation where she might have mentioned a new expense. I came up empty. That's when the real fear settled in, not that she'd spent money, but that she'd done it quietly, without a reason she was willing to share. I needed advice, and I needed it from someone who wouldn't panic. I called my old college friend Noah, a lawyer who'd helped me once with a business contract. I didn't want to sound dramatic, so I told him the situation carefully: changes in her behavior, the money questions, the odd transfers. He listened longer than I expected. When I finished, he didn't laugh or dismiss me. He just said, "I'm not telling you she's definitely planning something. But you're not crazy for wanting to protect yourself." Then he explained something that made my heart pound: in many places, timing matters. If someone expects divorce and starts moving assets after a filing, it can look like they're hiding money. But if protective steps are taken before anything official happens, and done legally, it can be different. Not always simple, not always safe, but possible. I asked him what protect meant. He gave me a list of options: separate accounts, documented transfers, trusts, and legal structures that could shield assets if a dispute became aggressive. He warned me to do everything above board and with proper paperwork. No sloppy shortcuts. When I hung up, I felt sick. This was my marriage. Not a lawsuit. Not a financial strategy. My wife and I were supposed to be a team. Yet here I was, planning like I was bracing for an attack. That night, Hannah came home upbeat. She kissed me, asked if I wanted to watch a movie, even offered to pick my favorite takeout. The warmth felt almost surreal, like she was playing a part in a play while I sat in the audience with the script in my lap. Later, when she fell asleep, I stayed up and gathered documents. Bank statements. Investment summaries. Property paperwork. Every click of my laptop felt like another tiny fracture in the life I thought we had. I called my mother and told her I might need help holding assets for a while. I didn't explain every detail, I couldn't. But she didn't ask much. She just said, "If you need me, I'm here." The next few days were a blur of paperwork and phone calls. I moved most of my assets, savings, investments, and even the house title, into a trust under my mother's name. Everything was notarized. Everything was dated. Everything was structured so it couldn't be easily challenged later. I left enough in the joint account to keep things normal. I wasn't trying to punish Hannah. I wasn't trying to trap her. I was trying to survive a situation I didn't understand. And still, she noticed nothing. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't say anything yet. Because after I completed the transfers, something changed in her. She stopped talking about finances entirely. Like the topic had been erased from her mind. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt like a pause before impact. 2 weeks passed. On the surface, everything looked fine. Hannah laughed more. She started asking what we should cook for dinner. She even talked about work in a normal way again. If I hadn't already seen the warning signs, I might have believed the storm had passed. But that's the cruel part about intuition. Once it wakes up, it doesn't go back to sleep. One Friday evening, she turned off the TV, sat beside me on the couch, and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase. She didn't cry. She didn't look angry. Her expression was calm, too calm. The kind of calm you see in someone who's rehearsed a speech in their head 100 times. "I think we should get a divorce," she said. The words didn't land as a surprise. They landed as confirmation. She gave me the usual lines: she needed space, she wanted to figure herself out, she felt like she'd lost her identity. It all sounded polished and generic, like a script pulled from a self-help podcast. Then her tone shifted. "I've made a lot of sacrifices," she said. "And I don't think you appreciate them. I deserve more." That last sentence hit differently. Not because it was true, but because it revealed something deeper: entitlement. Like she was preparing to make a case, not end a relationship. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I asked what "more" meant, but she avoided specifics. She also dropped a detail that burned itself into my memory. "A friend has helped me see things clearly," she said, eyes not quite meeting mine. A friend. I nodded slowly, letting her talk while my mind raced. Who was this friend? Why did it sound like someone was coaching her? The calmness, the rehearsed lines, the sudden certainty, it didn't feel like Hannah had simply changed her mind. It felt like someone had been feeding her confidence, maybe even strategy. When she finished, she watched me closely, like she expected a meltdown. I gave her none. "If that's what you want," I said, "we'll figure out next steps." Her eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't planned for that response. We slept in separate rooms that night. 3 days later, the paperwork arrived. And that's when I understood why she'd sounded so confident. The divorce petition wasn't just a request to end the marriage. It was a demand list. Half the house. Half the savings. A claim on assets that were primarily mine. The car. And a vague request for spousal support, despite her having a strong salary and steady job. It was aggressive, specific, and written like someone expected me to roll over. I read the papers twice, then a third time, feeling anger rise in a slow, controlled wave. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't, I'm unhappy. This was a planned extraction. My lawyer reviewed the petition and exhaled through his nose. This is ambitious, he said, the polite word for ruthless. I didn't tell Hannah I'd already protected my assets. I didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd been correct to act confident. I stayed quiet and let the process move forward. Meanwhile, I started doing my own digging, not hacking, not spying, just observing what was already public. That's when I found the name that would later connect everything. A guy I'd never heard Hannah mention, Caleb. He wasn't flagged as a lover in any obvious way. Just a steady stream of likes and supportive comments on her posts. You've got this. Proud of you. Onward. At first, I thought I was reaching. Then I saw a photo on his profile, taken at the same cafe near Riverside Park. Same day. Same background. Same starting over energy. And suddenly, the word friend didn't sound harmless at all. I needed confirmation, not assumptions. I didn't want to accuse Hannah of cheating based on a few social media clues. But I also didn't want to sit helpless while she tried to take my life apart. So I reached out to people who knew her, mutual friends who might say something unintentionally. The first person I called was Sophie, someone Hannah had known since college. I kept the tone casual. Has Hannah seemed off lately? Has she mentioned anything different? Sophie's response was clipped. I don't know, honestly. And I don't want to get involved. That reaction told me more than her words did. People don't refuse to answer harmless questions unless they're worried about stepping into a mess. I called another friend, Jenna, someone who had always been kind to both of us. Same approach, gentle questions. Jenna hesitated, then said she had to go. The line went dead. Then, unexpectedly, Jenna called back later that night. I shouldn't say anything, she said. But I feel guilty. I promised her I wouldn't repeat her name. After a long pause, she told me what she knew. Hannah had been spending time with a coworker named Caleb. She didn't know the full story, but there were rumors at Hannah's job that Caleb had been helping her with divorce decisions, pushing her to be firm, encouraging her to demand what she deserved. Hearing it out loud made my jaw clench. The idea that another man was coaching my wife on how to dismantle our marriage felt like humiliation layered on betrayal. Still, rumors weren't enough. That Saturday, I drove to the apartment Hannah had rented after we separated and parked a block away. I didn't feel proud of it. I felt desperate. I sat there for over an hour, telling myself I'd leave if nothing happened. Then I saw them. Hannah stepped out of the building with Caleb beside her. They weren't holding hands, but they moved with the kind of closeness you don't share with just a friend. They leaned toward each other when they spoke. Their body language was comfortable, practiced. They got into his car and drove away. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The sight was the confirmation my brain had been trying to avoid. Back home, I stared at the divorce petition again, and every line looked different now. The demands weren't just greed, they were a plan. A plan built with someone who had convinced her this was a victory path, not a moral failure. I imagined what Caleb must have told her, that she was strong, that she deserved compensation, that she was reclaiming her life. It's amazing how easily people justify cruelty when you wrap it in the language of empowerment. The first mediation session arrived quickly. Hannah showed up with her lawyer carrying a thick binder. The energy was confident on their side, like they expected to control the room. Her lawyer started listing demands as if they were reasonable: half the house, assets, car, support. My attorney waited until it was our turn. Then he placed a folder on the table and slid it across. Before we go further, he said, everyone should review these. Hannah's lawyer opened it and started reading. His expression changed fast. The confidence drained like someone had pulled a plug. He flipped pages quicker, brow tightening, mouth pressing into a thin line. Then he looked up, confused. What is this? He asked. My lawyer answered evenly, transfers of major assets into an irrevocable trust. Completed weeks before filing. Properly documented and notarized. The room went silent in a way that felt almost physical. Hannah grabbed the papers from her attorney and read them herself. Her face turned red, then pale, then red again. And that's when I saw it, the moment she realized her plan had failed. She turned toward me with fury, as if I'd committed the crime. "You planned this," she hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just sat there, because after everything, silence was the only honest response. After mediation, Hannah didn't behave like someone who was simply heartbroken. She behaved like someone whose investment had collapsed. The first day, her calls sounded almost gentle. She left voicemails saying we should talk, that things got messy, that we could still fix it. I didn't respond. My lawyer advised me not to engage, and honestly, I didn't have the emotional energy to perform compassion for someone who had tried to gut my future. By the second day, the tone shifted. Her voicemails became a chaotic mix, crying, then screaming, then crying again. She accused me of being greedy. Then she begged. Then she blamed me for everything. It was like she was throwing darts in the dark, hoping one would hit the right emotional target. When she couldn't reach me, she tried to reach everyone else. Mutual friends started messaging me with strange questions. Is this divorce some kind of prank? Hannah says it was a test. I felt like I was watching someone attempt to rewrite reality in real time, throwing out storylines until one stuck. At first, a few people believed her. Some assumed she was just devastated and confused. Others said I should have talked it out instead of taking drastic steps. I didn't waste energy defending myself to every person. I knew the truth would surface on its own, because lies tend to collapse under their own weight. And then it did, through someone I barely expected. A mutual acquaintance named Derek reached out and asked to meet. We weren't close, but we'd always been civil. When we met, he pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of messages between Hannah and Caleb. My body went cold as I read. Hannah wasn't venting. She was strategizing. Caleb was pushing her to take everything, telling her to make me feel guilty, telling her I owed her, telling her they'd start fresh after the settlement. Derek explained how he got them. Caleb had been bragging to a friend. That friend got uncomfortable when he realized what securing her future really meant. Screenshots traveled quietly until they reached Derek, who decided I needed to see them. The texts weren't just ugly. They were revealing. This wasn't a marriage ending because love died. This was a marriage being used as a stepping stone to finance a new life. Once the screenshots spread through our circle, the atmosphere shifted fast. People who had been neutral stepped away from Hannah. People who defended her got quiet. Her test narrative stopped making sense. Her prank narrative died completely. And Caleb? He evaporated. The moment it was clear Hannah wasn't walking away with a payout, he disappeared like he'd never existed. No supportive comments. No, you've got this. Nothing. The man who hyped her up to demand everything had no interest in staying for the consequences. Hannah's calls returned, but they were different now. Not angry. Desperate. Please talk to me, she begged in one voicemail. I'll drop everything. But there are apologies that come from regret, and apologies that come from losing. Hers felt like the second type. The divorce finalized with far less drama than she expected. Her lawyer quietly backed down once it became clear there was no realistic path to winning what she demanded. The trust structure was solid. The timing was clean. The paperwork was airtight. In the end, she left with her personal items and the reality she created. And I was left with something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. When everything ended, the strangest part wasn't the emptiness. It was the quiet. For months, my life had been full of tiny alarms, phone habits, hidden calls, vague answers, financial nudges, and that gnawing sense that something was unfolding without my consent. When the divorce finalized, the alarms stopped. And what remained was silence that felt clean. I kept the house. I kept my savings. I kept the investments I'd built through years of work. But more importantly, I kept my dignity, because I refused to beg someone who was actively plotting against me. My mother helped me more than she probably realized. After the paperwork settled, she showed up with paint samples and a list of ideas like she was staging a gentle takeover of my grief. We repainted the living room. We reorganized the space. We threw out things that felt haunted by old memories. It wasn't just redecorating. It was reclaiming. Friends who had wavered came back with apologies. A few admitted they'd believed Hannah at first because her story sounded emotional and convincing. Others said they'd seen Caleb's influence and didn't know how to approach me. I didn't hold grudges. I didn't have the energy. I just adjusted my understanding of who was reliable and who wasn't. Once, Hannah's brother called me and apologized too. I didn't know what she was doing, he said. I'm sorry. I believed him. I could hear how shaken he was by the fallout. As for Hannah, she tried a few more times, messages that sounded softer, more human, less combative. But trust isn't a light switch. It doesn't turn back on because someone says the right words after they've done the wrong things. I didn't hate her. Hate requires a kind of emotional investment I wasn't willing to give. What I felt was clearer: she made choices, and those choices had consequences. The person who I thought would protect our life together had tried to dismantle it for a payout and a promise from a man who didn't even stick around. That's what betrayal looks like sometimes. Not rage. Not cruelty in the moment. Just calculated decisions made behind your back, wrapped in the language of finding myself and deserving more. The lesson I carried away wasn't never trust again. It was trust, but don't ignore patterns. Love is not blindness. Love is seeing clearly and choosing each other anyway. Hannah stopped choosing us long before she said the word divorce. And now, my life is mine again. No more second-guessing what's on the other side of a closed door. No more wondering who she's texting while she smiles at me. No more defending my reality to people who want a clean story. I'm not writing this to sound victorious. I'm writing it because I learned something painful. Sometimes, the person you built a home with becomes the person you need to protect your home from. The chapter with her is closed. The rest of the book is up to me.